I, 31 male, am the kind of guy who fixes things. Leaky faucet, weird noise in the car, project at work going sideways. Give me the problem, and I'll work backward until I find the source. I'm a project manager by trade, which means I spend my entire professional life catching issues before they explode. Methodical, patient. I notice details other people miss, which is exactly why what happened wrecked me the way it did. Not because I missed the signs, but because I saw them and told myself I was overthinking it. My fiancé and I had been together for years. I proposed 11 months before any of this went down, at a cabin in the Smoky Mountains, end of a hiking trail that opened into this clearing with a view that looked like a painting.
She cried.
I cried a little. We called both our families that same night. We had a September wedding date, a venue deposit paid, and a guest list of 140 people sitting in a shared Google Doc. So when she broke up with me on a Tuesday in March, I didn't just lose a girlfriend. I lost a future I had been actively building, brick by brick, for 4 years. She did it over dinner at this Italian place we both liked. Halfway through the pasta, she put her fork down and said, "I don't think I'm happy."
Not we.
Not us. Just her. I asked her what was making her unhappy. She couldn't name a single specific thing. Just kept circling back to needing space, wanting to figure herself out, wanting different things. I asked what things. She said she didn't know yet. Asked how long she'd been feeling this way. She said a while. Then she said, "This isn't about anything you did." I believed her. That was my mistake. I drove home alone, sat in my driveway for almost 40 minutes, then went inside and fed the dog and stared at my ceiling until 3 a.m. Didn't text her. Didn't call. I've never been someone who argues with a closed door. Next day, I went to work. Told nobody. Came home. Went to sleep. Day 2 after the breakup, I'm doing the mindless late-night scroll you do when your brain refuses to shut off, and I see it. Her post. On Facebook. Asterisk, can't wait to be a Mrs. Ring asterisk. Posted at 11:47 p.m. The night after she ended our engagement. I stared at it long enough that my screen timed out. I unlocked my phone and read it again. The comments were already going. Her friends losing their minds with ring emojis. Her aunt commenting, finally. Her cousin saying, "I knew it, I knew it, I knew it." I went to her profile. And right there, on her profile, her last name had been updated. Not to my last name. To a completely different one. One I recognized because I'd heard it once before, years ago. She'd mentioned an ex from before we got together, briefly, the way you mention someone when you're trying to show the relationship wasn't serious. She hadn't just moved on the day after our breakup. She had been gone for a long time. Long enough for this to already be public, last name already changed, friends already celebrating like they'd been waiting for her to finally come back to this guy. I put my phone face down, walked outside, stood in the cold for a few minutes, then came back in, and did what I do best. I started paying attention. I went back through everything, not frantically but methodically. The book club nights that ran until midnight. The weekends she drove to Charlotte to see her college friend. The way her phone had started landing face down on every surface in our apartment about 7 or 8 months ago. At the time I'd clocked each of these things and filed them under probably nothing. Now I was pulling every file back out. Then I did something simple. I looked him up. His profile was mostly private, but his profile picture was public. He was in it with a woman. A different woman. Her head on his shoulder. Both of them smiling, and in the caption she'd tag herself with a little diamond emoji next to her name. This man had a fiancé. I sat with that for an hour. The full shape of it settled in slowly. My ex hadn't just reconnected with someone from her past. She had gotten in between a man and the woman he was engaged to, and that woman had absolutely no idea. I took screenshots. Clean, time-stamped everything. My ex's post. Her updated last name on her profile. His profile. His fiancé's profile. A comment thread where my ex had responded to a friend's question with a blushing emoji and the words, "It's been a long time coming." Long time coming. While we were engaged and had a venue deposit down and a guest list open in a Google Doc, I found his fiancé's profile. She wasn't private. Her recent posts were venue research and bridal inspiration boards. She was in the middle of planning a wedding, completely unaware. I sent her a message. No drama, no long explanation. Just the screenshots and one line. Asterisk, I think you deserve to know what's been going on. Asterisk, then I put my phone down and went to sleep. She responded at 6:14 a.m. I know the time because I was already awake. Her message was long, the kind that tells you someone typed and deleted and retyped several times before finally hitting send. She'd seen everything. She recognized the timestamps. She told me she'd had suspicions, small things that hadn't added up, and what I sent her was the piece that locked the whole picture together. She didn't ask me if it was real. She just said, asterisk, how long? Asterisk. I told her what I knew, which wasn't precise dates, but the public evidence told its own story. She thanked me. Short, controlled. The tone of someone holding themselves together through sheer discipline. Within 3 hours, both their worlds fell apart at the same time. I wasn't in the room for any of it, but the aftermath came back to me fast enough. My ex started texting me around 9 a.m. First message was calm. Asterisk, we need to talk. Asterisk then. Asterisk, I know you contacted her. Why would you do that? Asterisk then, about 20 minutes after that, the mask came off completely. Asterisk, you had no right to go through my private life and contact people. That is stalking behavior, and I will report you. Asterisk. Stalking. For screenshotting a post she shared with 400 Facebook friends and a name change she put on her own public profile. I screenshotted the threat and said nothing. She showed up at my apartment that afternoon. She walked in like she still lived there, sat down on the couch, and immediately started talking about how complicated things had been for her, how confused she'd been, how she'd never meant for it to happen this way, how she had been planning to tell me eventually. Eventually. I just need you to not make this worse, she said, looking at me with this expression that I can only describe as expectant, like I had some obligation to help her manage the damage from her own choices. Worse for who? I asked. She said his fiancée was threatening to goad his family, that his parents had already called, that there were financial complications because they'd been living together, shared accounts, a lease. She looked at me and said very plainly, if you had just stayed out of it, this could have been handled quietly. Quietly, I said. Nobody needed to get hurt. His fiancée was booking a venue, I said. She needed to know. She would have found out eventually. I just looked at her. Then she shifted and brought up the engagement ring. I still had it because she'd given it back when she ended things. She said she thought it would be fair if I sold it and split the money with her, since she'd helped pick it out and it had been an investment in our future. I had to take a full second. You want half the ring money? I said. I'm just saying it doesn't have sentimental value for you anymore. I'm going to need you to leave, I said. She didn't move right away. Tried the softer version, brought up the cabin, the Colorado trip we'd taken, her voice going quieter. This was the version of her that had always worked on me before. I opened the front door and stood next to it until she left. She wasn't done, though. Not even close. Over the next 2 weeks, she and he ran a coordinated story. He told his fiancée that I was an unstable ex who'd been harassing my ex for months and that I'd manipulated the screenshots out of spite. My ex backed the story up. His fiancée, who was sharper than either of them had given her credit for, asked one simple question. Asterisk, then why does her last name on Facebook match yours? Asterisk. There was no answer to that. He then came at me directly. Reached out through a mutual acquaintance, someone my ex knew from work who apparently also knew him, asking if we could have a man-to-man conversation to clear up some misunderstandings. I told the mutual acquaintance to pass back one message. I had nothing to discuss, and any further contact from either of them would be documented.
He pushed anyway.
Sent me a Facebook message, genuinely bold move, saying I had damaged his relationship based on assumptions, and that I should think carefully about the legal consequences of spreading false information about someone. I forwarded it directly to his fiancée. That was the last I heard from him. But my ex had one more move. She called my mother. My mother called me confused and a little upset, saying my ex had reached out to tell her I'd been cyberstalking her and contacting her personal connections, and that she was worried about my mental state and felt my family should be aware. My mother, to her absolute credit, said to her, Asterisk, I raised him. He doesn't do that. What exactly did he do? Asterisk. Apparently my ex tried to explain but couldn't frame screenshotting a public post as harassment without the whole story coming apart. My mother called me after. I walked her through everything calmly and completely, and she went quiet for a moment. Then she said, Send me those screenshots.
I did. She said, Okay.
I'll handle things on my end. I love my mother. Here's the part that actually gave me real closure, though. I knew things about our shared finances that neither of them had thought about. My ex and I had opened a joint savings account specifically for the wedding and honeymoon. We'd agreed on $400 a month each. I'd been contributing every month without fail. A few weeks after all of this blew up, I went back through the statements. I still had full access and went through every single month carefully. Her contributions had stopped 8 months ago. Not reduced. Stopped entirely. That was $3,200 of my money sitting in an account she'd verbally agreed to match. I called a family attorney to understand exactly where I stood. He confirmed that since it was a joint account and the contribution agreement was verbal with no formal contract, a civil claim for the exact amount would be more trouble than it was worth, but that closing the account and withdrawing the full balance was completely within my legal rights since both parties had equal withdrawal access. I withdrew the full balance and moved it to my personal account. Then I closed the joint account. She found out within 24 hours. The message she sent me was genuinely unhinged. Accused me of stealing. Said she'd contact her attorney. Said she had records of her contributions and would prove the money was partially hers. I sent her the bank statements with her missing 8 months highlighted and one sentence. Asterisk, your attorney will advise you to drop this. Asterisk. Never heard from her attorney. Because there was no attorney. And she knew that I knew that. The venue deposit was the last thing to untangle. We'd both contributed equal amounts toward it on a shared credit card we'd opened specifically for wedding expenses. The venue's cancellation policy allowed a 50% refund if you canceled more than 6 months before the date. We were still inside that window, barely. I called the venue, explained the engagement was off, and handled the cancellation professionally. The partial refund came back to the shared card. I contacted my ex exactly once to coordinate splitting the remaining card balance and closing it. She agreed. The card was closed within a month, every cent accounted for. The ring I sold 4 months later. Put the money toward a solo trip to Portugal, somewhere I'd always wanted to go and she'd always had zero interest in. I spent 10 days there with no agenda and no one to check in with, eating well, and walking around cities I didn't know. From what eventually filtered back to me through the mutual acquaintance, his fiancée left him. She'd retained an attorney to navigate getting off their shared lease. In most states, you can petition for lease release or negotiate an early exit with the landlord when there's a documented relationship breakdown, and that process was apparently moving forward. My ex and her ex were apparently back together officially since they'd burned every other option, and by all accounts it was not going smoothly. The relationship that had been so urgent she couldn't wait one day to announce it publicly was struggling under the weight of how it began. I won't pretend I didn't feel something when I heard that. But it wasn't satisfaction exactly. It was more like confirmation. Some things carry the damage of how they started no matter how hard you try to outrun it. I didn't blow anything up out of anger. I didn't post anything publicly. I didn't make a single move that wasn't clean and documented and completely within my rights. I just made sure the right people had the right information, the right accounts had the right balances, and the story they were trying to tell about me had nowhere to stand. The screenshots didn't lie. They never do. If this story kept you reading to the end, hit subscribe because apparently knowing when to stay quiet and when to send one message is a skill worth following.